Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Shila Prabhupada. Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Jayam Vishnu Pad Paramahamsa Parivaj Rakacharya Ashtottara Shatashi Srimad Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jayam Vishnu Pad Paramahamsa Parivaj Rakacharya Ashtottara Shatashi Srimad Bhakti Siddhanta Sarasvati Thakur Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Karantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Go Premanandi. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 9, entitled Dhruva Maharaja Returns Home. Text 15. Please repeat. Tvang Nitya Mukta Parishuddha Vibhuddha Atma Kutastha Adi Purusho Bhagavang Striyadishaha Yad Buddhya Vasthitam Akanditya Swadrishtya Akanditya Swadrishtya Drashta Sitab Abhimako Vyatirakta Ase Tvang Nitya Mukta Parishuddha Vibhuddha Atma Kutastha Adi Purusho Bhagavang Striyadhishaha Yad Buddhya Vasthityam Akanditaya Swadrishtya Drashta Stitav Abhimako Vyatirakta Ase Tvang Nitya Mukta Parishuddha Vibhuddha Atma Kutastha Adi Purusho Bhagavang Striyadhishaha Yad Buddhya Vasthitam Akanditya Swadrishtya Drashta Stitav Abhimukho Vyatarakta Ase Kutastha Adi Purusho Bhagavang Striyadhishaha Yad Buddhya Avestatam Akanditya Swadrishtya Drashta Sata Ravimko Vyatarikta Ase Om Nitya Vauta Nisutta Vibhuddha Atma Kutastha Adi Purusho Bhagavang Striyadhishaha Mutaya Avastatam Akadintya Sadrishtya Stitava Bhiviko Vyatarikta Ase Nitya Mukta Bodhishuddha Nirukta Atma Uttasta Adi Purusho Bhagavan Suyadhishaha Buddhya Avastitam Kandya Swadrishta Vaishnavis. Nitya Mukta Parishuddha Viduddha Atma Kutasta Adi Purusho Bhagavan Triyodhishaha Yad Buddhya Avastitam Makanideya Swadrishta Drashtastitha Vavimako Vyatarata Ase Tang Nitya Mukta Parishuddha Vibuddha Atma Utastha Adi Purusho Bhagavan Triyodhishaha Yad Buddhya Vastita Makanditya Swadrishta Drashta Stita Vabhimako Vyatarita Ase Nitya Mukta Parishuddha Vibhuddha Atma Utastha Adi Purusho Bhagavan Triyodhishaha Tvam, you, Nitya, eternally, Mukta, liberated, Parishuddha, uncontaminated, Vibuddha, full of knowledge, Atma, the Supreme Soul, Kutastha, changeless, Adi, original, Purusha, person, Bhagavan, the Lord, full with 6 opulences, Tri Adhisha, master of the 3 modes, Yat, whence, Buddhi, of intellectual activities, Avastitam, tin, all stages, Akanditya, unbroken, Swadrishtya, by transcendental vision, Drashta, you witness, Stito, for maintaining the universe, Adimaka, enjoyer of the results of all sacrifices, Vyatirikta, differently, Ase, you are situated. Translation. My Lord, by your unbroken transcendental glance, you are the supreme witness of all stages of intellectual activities. You are eternally liberated. Your existence is situated in pure goodness, and you are existent in the Supersoul without change. You are the original personality of Godhead, full with 6 opulences, and you are eternally the master of the 3 modes of material nature. Thus, you are always different from the ordinary living entities. As Lord Vishnu, you maintain all the affairs of the entire universe, and yet you stand aloof and are the enjoyer of the results of all sacrifices. Purport. An atheistic argument against the supremacy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead states that if God, the Supreme Person, appears and disappears and sleeps and awakens, then what is the difference between God and the living entity? Dhruva Maharaja is carefully distinguishing the existence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead from that of the living entities. He points out the following differences. The Lord is eternally liberated. Whenever he appears, even within this material world, he is never entangled by the three modes of material nature. He is known therefore as Triyodhisha, the master of the three modes of material nature. In Bhagavad Gita it is said, Daivi Hyesha Gunamayi, Mama Maya Dharatyaya. The living entities are all entangled in the three modes of material nature. The external energy of the Lord is very strong, but the Lord, as the master of the three modes of material nature, is ever liberated from the action and reactions of those modes. He therefore is uncontaminated, as stated in the Ishopanishad. The contamination of the material world does not affect the Supreme Godhead. Krishna therefore says in the Bhagavad Gita that those who are rascals and fools think of him as an ordinary human being, not knowing his parang bhavam. Parang bhavam refers to his being always transcendentally situated. Material contamination cannot affect him. Another difference between the Lord and the living entity is that the living entity is always in darkness. Even though he may be situated in the mode of goodness, there are still so many things which are unknown to him. But it is not the same for the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He knows past, present, and future, and everything that is happening in everyone's heart. Bhagavad Gita confirms this. Vedahang samatitani. The Lord is not part of the soul. He is the unchangeable, supreme soul. And the living entities are his parts and parcels. The living entity is forced to appear in the material world under the direction of Daiva Maya. But when the Lord appears, he comes by his own internal potency, Atma Maya. Besides that, a living entity is within the time of past, present, and future. His life has a beginning, a birth, and in the conditioned state, his life ends with death. But the Lord is Adi Purusha, the original person. In the Brahma Sanghita, Lord Brahma offers his respect to the Adi Purusha, Govinda, the original person, who has no beginning, whereas the creation of the material world has a beginning. The Vedanta says, Janmad Yasya Yata. Everything is born from the Supreme, but the Supreme has no birth. He has all the six opulences in full and beyond comparison. He is the master of all material nature. His intelligence is not broken under any circumstances, and he stands aloof, although he is the maintainer of the whole creation. As stated in the Vedas, Katha Upanishad 2.2.13, Nityo Nityanang Chaitanash Chaitananam. The Lord is the supreme maintainer. Living entities are meant to serve him by offering sacrifices, for he is the rightful enjoyer of the results of all sacrifices. Everyone, therefore, should engage himself in the devotional service of the Lord with his life, his riches, his intelligence, and his words. This is the original constitutional position of the living entities. One should never compare the sleeping of an ordinary living entity to the sleeping of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in the causal ocean. There is no stage at which the living entity can compare to the Supreme Person. The Mayavadi philosophers, being unable to adjust to all this, come to the conclusion of impersonalism or voidism. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Jnana Timarandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshu Meditam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. So one may wonder, what's the goal of these prayers, in particular this one here, where Dhruva Maharaj is, as Prabhupada says, carefully distinguishing the existence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead from that of the living entities. And the doubt is dealt with or explained in the first sentence, that if we as living entities consider, because Krishna or Vishnu has similar activities as ours, eating, sleeping, etc., then we may be as good as God, or he may be one of us. As Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Itcha Dvesha Samuttena Dvanda Mohena Bharata. Sarva Bhutani Sammoham Sagayanti Parantapa. O sign of Bharata, O conqueror of foe, all living entities are born into delusion, bewildered by dualities arisen from desire and hate. So we have an ignorance of our relationship with Krishna. The tendency in the material world is we think we're something we're not. We consider that, in one sense, it sounds ridiculous that we're trying to be God, and it can be very hard to, especially for those who have no contact with Krishna consciousness, to admit that in their own way, small and significant ways, they're trying to imitate the position of God. What is the position of God? As Prabhupada explains in the introduction to Bhagavad Gita, he has there's two psychological divisions: the controller and the enjoyer. So when we hear, this is Dhruva Maharaj's attempt to deal with these problems. He's clearly distinguishing the glories of Krishna. And when we hear these glories of Krishna, we slowly realize that this envy of Krishna, of course, it doesn't affect Krishna at all, but it causes big problems for us. So when we continuously hear the glories of Krishna and realize our insignificance, hopefully it'll deal with this envy problem of Krishna's position, and we can start to surrender to him. So Dhruva Maharaj explains many different qualities of Krishna that we can meditate on. And the first one is his unbroken transcendental glance. So I was trying to meditate on different qualities of Krishna's glance and our glance and how they differ. And I was remembering many years ago, I was in a small town in New Zealand called Hamilton. We run a little outreach center there. And I was doing some book distribution. And I was trying to get someone's attention. I looked and smiled at someone. And he was at a intersection. And he kind of looked back at me like this. And I couldn't quite read him. I don't know if he was reciprocating, or he was maybe he'd recognize me, or he was interested. So he looked away. He was at a crossing, and the lights there, and so he looked away again, looking straight ahead across the road, and then he looked back at me again, and I noticed he looked back at me. So I looked over and I smiled at him. And then for a few minutes, maybe not a few minutes, it was some time, he started yelling obscenities at me and calling me gay and all sorts of things. I just smiled at him twice, So that was the potency of my glance. I don't know if you would call it transcendental, but that was my glance. And then there was another one. There was a story of another brahmachari in another small town, and I was traveling with him at the time, and he told us about it later. He was walking. He'd just been doing some book distribution out at the front of a mall, and he was walking back towards the main street, and there was a gentleman, I don't know if that's the right word, but there was a man in a car, sitting, or maybe it was a truck, and they just happened to, as my friend, the brahmachari, was walking past, they just happened to meet glances, and he looked up like that, and the guy in the car looked down. And then the guy in the car, he jumped out. He was some gang member, and he threatened to kill him just like that on the spot, deadly serious. What are you looking at? I'm gonna pound you into the ground, a big guy as well. And the brahmachari was super skinny, just tries to work out, but he's very skinny, and he just that was the potency of his glance. But I don't think actually it was a very pure brahmachari. It was probably less about his glance and more about the character of the other person. But still, he just bowed his head down and went like this, and he said, "I'm really sorry, I'm a monk, I'm just trying to do some charity work." And the guy left him alone. And we've probably all got different stories of the potency of our glances. But when we think about the glance of Krishna, he does many wonderful glances, as we many wonderful activities with his glances, as we hear as we pray every morning, Angani Yasya Sakalendriya Vritti Manti, that he can, with any of his limbs, he can perform all the activities of the others interchangeably. So when we offer boga to the Lord and we ask him to accept it, he doesn't need to jump off the altar and grab it with his hands and put it in his mouth. Just by looking over the devotee, just by looking over the boga, he can accept it. He can taste all the different ingredients and of course the bhakti. And then one of the most mystical things that the Lord performs is he simply glances over the material energy, inert material energy, and all the living entities, just through his glance, impregnated into the material energy. So that's the Lord's transcendental glance that we hear about, Dhruva Maharaj speaks about. He also explains that Krishna is ever liberated. Nitya Mukta. In Nectar of Devotion, the 21st quality of Krishna is pure, or supremely pure. As explained, that one who is supremely pure is either one of two ways, generally speaking, that they are never contaminated in their activities, and also they can purify others. Of course, Krishna has both of these aspects of purity in fullness, unlimitedly. Just like the material example that Srila Prabhupada gives is just by the presence of the sun's rays. It can not only stay free from contamination in its presence all over the existence, but it can also purify whatever it comes in contact with. Just like it may, the sun rays may come in contact with a urine on the ground, and it can purify the area, but it doesn't get affected. So Krishna can perform the most externally morally abominable activities, and he doesn't get affected by that. So we see in his childhood, he's doing what I guess in modern society is just considered the norm. In New Zealand they have this thing, they have two crazy things that they're doing at the moment, is really on the rise. They have everyone heard of ram raiding? I don't know if it's big over here yet. It's a massive thing in New Zealand. It's always probably been around, but now it's like very popular. Just these young people, usually they're under the age of 18, so they can't get a criminal record. They drive a car and just through the front of the shop, all the glass breaks, and then they can jump in there and steal money and lots of goods and things like that. So it's a very common thing in New Zealand. And also, this is a worldwide thing, but it's happening in New Zealand. I don't know about Australia, but massive groups of young people, even like the ages between like 11 and 13, there might be a group of 40 or 50 of them. They'll just pick a target on a public street, and they'll just attack them and take everything. And you can imagine like a massive mob like that. Even if the cops come, there's only so much the cops can do. Maybe if there's a big group of cops, they'll scare them away. But so this is like becoming the norm. Actually, one of my friends is a policeman in New Zealand, and he was saying crime since last 5-6 years is just like skyrocketing. It's getting so much worse. That's in New Zealand. So these are kind of like the norm. But in a normal society, things like stealing and hurting people is, it's not normal. What to speak of for a little child like Krishna? He's stealing butter, yogurt, all these different milk products. If he becomes frustrated in his attempts, he urinates in the homes, makes a mess, pinches babies if he can't do anything, makes them cry. So this is Krishna, but by these activities he's completely uncontaminated. He doesn't become like It doesn't escalate. You know, like a lot of these young people, they do crimes when they're young, and it just gets worse and worse. They get involved with gang members. You know, I've met lots of people that have been to prison, and they say they just did a little crime, but when they go to prison, they get trained to how to be serious criminals. You know, but Krishna, you know, he doesn't like. He's not like that. You know, he just does his little crimes as a kid, and that's it. He doesn't become. He's not doing it because of envy or hatred. But not only that, he's doing these seemingly abominable, morally wrong activities. But by these activities, he's purifying, in one sense. Of course, the residents of Vrindavan also ever liberated like Krishna. But I guess we, the listeners of his pastimes, become purified. But we hear in the 10th canto, Srimad Bhagavatam, he's always thinking about different activities he can do to create gossip in Vrindavan, so that all the Vrajavasis can relish his activities and talk about his activities. And then we become purified by doing that. So Krishna his activities are completely opposite. When we in this world, we may do some bad activities. People hear about the bad activities. It may inspire others to do bad activities. But Krishna, he does these naughty things, and all it does is create auspiciousness. Whereas us in this material world, we are so easily contaminated, so easily brought down into lower modes of nature. Like it is said in Chaitanya Charitamrita, that if one sees like an atheist or materialist, or maybe the quote's not correct, like a Mayavadi, we should immediately bathe in the Ganges. That's how easily we're contaminated, just by seeing someone. And there's this another nice shloka quoted in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Nishkinchanasya bhagavad bhajanon mukasya param parang jigamishor bhavasagarasya sandashanam vishayanam atayoshatangcha ha hanta hanta vishabhakshanatopya sadhu. Alas, for a person seriously desiring to cross the material ocean, engage in the loving service of the Lord without material motives, seeing a materialist or a woman who is similarly interested is more abominable than drinking poison. So it's a very heavy quote, but it shows if we are serious about becoming Krishna conscious, pure devotees of the Lord, this is how easily we can be contaminated. Of course, that's a whole different topic that could be opened up for discussion. But the point is, Krishna, who's Nityamukta, ever liberated, is on a whole different level of existence compared to the jivas in the material world. Another quality that Prabhupada explains in this purport is that Krishna is existent in the Supersoul without change. And Prabhupada explains that we are forced to take our birth by Daiva Netrena, by divine will. As we understand, Krishna, his birth and appearance in this world is always very mysterious and completely of his own free will. Whereas, I don't know about many people in this room, but a lot of us may think that we could have had a better situation, a better birth growing up. You know, there's room for improvement. Certain families, countries, communities. You know, I just think about the bad habits. I'm trying to put it lightly, without going into too much detail. But actually, I was so I grew up in Sydney, but I think I met one devotee doing books in by Central Station, and I'm pretty sure it was a devotee. They said, oh, they explained the book, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. I'll just go get some money from the FPOS machine, and I'll be back. But I just totally forgot. So it's a good lesson for the book distributors. Don't be disappointed if someone doesn't come back, because, you know, apohanam. Like, Prabhupada explains that in this purport that the living entity is always in darkness. So our state is always forgetfulness, and sometimes we remember. So the book distributor shouldn't be disappointed if someone doesn't come back, because they probably just forgot. Anyway, but that's a bit of a side story. Yeah, I met devotees once maybe, but I was in Chatswood doing a little bit of book distribution for a couple of hours the other day, and I'm pretty sure I was standing in the place where I very first got drunk. So every time I come back to Sydney, it's nice to kind of like purify these bad samskaras that I've had. But I'm pretty sure it was the exact same spot. Things have changed a little bit. It was 20 years ago now. I think I was 14 or 15 at the time. So, yeah, I certainly didn't choose to be born in such a family, and, well, not, of course, by our activities and our behavior in our previous births, we indirectly choose certain births, but it's not like a conscious decision, I'm going to have Michael and Ros Wilson as my parents and be born in, grow up in Manly and go to all these schools where you get, it's kind of like this prisoner I was telling you about, you get trained how to do all these things. I meet so many people on books, and they often Indian background, and they tell me about, oh yeah, I know Mahabharata, I learned about that when I was a kid, and I read Bhagavad Gita when I was a kid, and I'm just thinking, what was I reading when I was a kid, It's like goosebumps. I can't remember the Dragon Ball Z, and oh my god. That's like I was saying, I'm trying to keep it PC, there's a lot worse things going on. So, but Krishna's not like that, he chooses. As we hear in Bhagavatam, in the first canto, as my spiritual master, His Holiness Devamarita Swami, explains in Searching for Vedic India, it's womb warfare. All the demons, the asuras, have taken birth on planet Earth, and Krishna and his associates are also doing the same. Krishna is sending all his close associates before he takes birth into the wombs of living entities on the Earth planet. So not only is he not forced to take birth, but he also, before he takes birth, he does this, womb warfare. In one sense, he sends all his close associates to take birth before him. So he's not only choosing his own birth, his parents and his place, but he's also populating the planet with all his family before he comes, and all his associates and all his friends. So another quality of Krishna that Dhruva Maharaj explains is he is the Adi Purusha, the original personality of Godhead. In our conditioned state, Prabhupada explains in the purport, we have a beginning, a middle, and an end. We are existing in these three phases of time. Often when we speak about Krishna's omniscience, his existence in all aspects of reality, we think usually in terms of space. As the super soul, he is present in all atoms, all living entities, in the heart of all living entities. But he's also omnipresent in all phases of time, past, present, and future, which is a pretty inconceivable thought for us to have. We can kind of get our heads around being omnipresent in an all-pervading sense in terms of space, but when we start thinking about how we can be present in all aspects of, because that's just like an expansion, we're conscious of this body, we can feel different aspects at the same time. We can hear, we can touch, we can feel, understand where our body is in space. We can smell things. We can feel things on several parts of our body. So being all-pervading in space is just like an expansion of that. But our consciousness of time is just like one moment. Even if we're trying to think about the past or the future, we're just like in that one little moment. It's very hard for us to conceive of Krishna being all-pervading and in time as well. And then another quality that Krishna, or Dhruva Maharaj explains, is that Krishna is eternally the master of the three modes of nature. So our position, I was talking to Bhakti Edward the other day, we were talking about the concept of free will. And this verse, Prakrite kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvashaha ahankara vimudhatma katahamiti manyate, that the spirit soul, bewildered by the effects of the three modes of material nature, thinks himself the controller in charge of the modes of nature. But Krishna calls him a vimudha, not a vimukta, or not a vibudha, we hear about in this verse, but a vimudha, a superfool. So that's our state, is that we're so entangled in the modes of material nature that not only do we think we have free will, but we think we're in charge of the modes of material nature. We think that, it's like if you have an enemy, it's like one thing to know that you have an enemy. Like they don't like you, they act against you, they have you may know a bit of their plans about how they want to pull you down. But when you think your enemy is your friend, or when you don't even know he exists, that's when the trouble comes. So that's like the modes of nature. We're so entangled with them that we think our decision-making process is our free will. But if we think about it, even from like a mundane or modern scientific perspective, when we go to make a decision, what's our decision based? Obviously, it's different from a devotee. For a devotee, we make decisions based on Guru Sadhu Shastra. But for a materialist, or for an aspiring devotee, when we go through our decision-making process, what is the criteria we're using to make a decision? It's conditioning based on the three modes of material nature. So there's a sense of free will. Like I was telling Bhakti Edward, I remember when I hit like 15, I had I was so lazy growing up. Bare minimum at school, bare minimum exercise. It was just like everything was about the bare minimum. And I just remember I woke up one day and I was like, I'm sick of being lazy. And then that's when the mode of passion kicked in a little bit more in my life. It was just like that, It was just like a decision. So I thought I was exhibiting my free will, which I was. But what was the option? That was just like pure, Shuddha Tamas, and then the Shuddha Tamas became contaminated by a little bit of Rajagun, So that was my exhibition of free will. But no, Krishna, he's just like the purity. Not only is he fully in charge of the modes of material nature, but he gives others, by coming in contact with him, to become free of the grip of the three modes of material nature. So Dhruva Maharaj is very intelligently explaining these differences between the insignificant living entity and the Supreme Lord Krishna, in attempt to separate or deal with his doubt that we are on the same level as God. But the interesting thing is, when we become free from this doubt and we become more and more elevated in Krishna consciousness, we may also come to the same state of consciousness. Just like the cowherd boys in Vrindavan, they see Krishna do a wonderful feat. What did they think? Maybe he's a super empowered living entity. Maybe he's a demigod. Maybe he's even the Supreme Lord. But he's just our friend. So what does that mean? What's the logical conclusion? That we must also be demigods or supremely empowered living entities. So when we see the Lord through the lens of envy, the tendency is that we want to either put ourselves up on the same platform or pull down Krishna to one of us. Different thoughts of Mayavad and impersonalism. That's the goal. But when our vision becomes covered with love of Krishna, pure love of Krishna, in the mood of the Rajavasis, then the same thing happens. we become so enchanted, bewildered by Krishna's sweetness, that we lose vision of his supremacy. But the difference between the conditioned living entity who loses vision and derides Krishna, and the vision of the pure devotee who's bewildered by Krishna's sweetness, is that the devotee is always acting for Krishna's pleasure. They never lose their vision of Krishna as the Supreme Lord, and they always act in that capacity. That's never lost. So as aspiring devotees, we need to keep hearing Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya, the difference between us and the Supreme Lord, the greatness of Krishna and the insignificance of us, and understanding that difference allows us to surrender more and more to Krishna. And of course, as we understand from Srimad Bhagavatam, Kalaya dosha nidhe rajan asti heko mahan gunaha kirtanadeva krishnasya mukta sangas parang vrajet. That Kalaya dosha, that this Kali Yuga is an ocean of faults. Sometimes I know my own mentality, I get so excited and proud even when I see faults in other living entities or in this world, in an attempt to show my supremacy, prove to myself at least that I'm better. But actually, if you're swimming in an ocean of water, salt water, and maybe you're with a friend, you're going for a swim at the beach, Bondi Beach, Manly Beach, and you might point out to your friends, hey, did you see there's a bit of salt water over there? They just look at you like you're an idiot, Like, who do you think you are? Like, do you really need to mention that? So that's the state of our consciousness. According to Bhagavatam, that's the state of our consciousness when we start finding faults in this world. Is that, of course, Krishna says that we should see the fault of birth, death, disease, and old age. But in terms of us trying to show our own supremacy, especially when it comes to our relationships with other devotees, we shouldn't become so proud if we see faults in others. Also, interested. But what should we become interested in? Is the holy name, chanting the holy name. Nama Chintamani Krishnas Chaitanya Rasa Vigraha Purna Shuddho Nitya Mukto Vidatam Nami Naminaho. This is what we should become excited about. This is what we should become proud of. An opportunity to chant the holy names, connect with the Nitya Mukta. So we're hearing Bhagavatam, we're slowly realizing the greatness, the sweetness of Krishna, and that will inspire us to chant Hare Krishna and get more association with Krishna. Thank you for listening. Any comments or questions? Hare Krishna. You answered your own question. We read it because we're told to read Bhagavatam. That's the essence. That Srila Prabhupada's mercy instructions is to read Bhagavatam. In one sense, you could say, I've heard from this commentary, Waves of Devotion, I'm pretty sure it says in there, that, I forgot what I was going to say. we start reading Bhagavatam simply because of the instruction of the spiritual master. Just like, the common example is the unripe mango on the windowsill. So in one sense, we are free from envy, because we've made the sankalpa, the determination that we want to give up envy. So that's kind of part of our qualification, which is coming from the mercy of the spiritual master, from Srila Prabhupada. So it's all connected in that way. We get the instruction of the spiritual master, we accept Krishna as the ultimate goal of our life. In that way we're pure devotees. It's just a matter of time before we make that. And this envy, it's just a matter of time. We've decided that it's not part of our, we've seen the enemy, we want to give it up. I was just trying to think of this example that I had from Waves of Devotion. Maybe I'll get back to you on that, see if I can remember later. Is there anything else? Maybe another comment on that question? Another question? Shriman, the singer. You don't have to. You wouldn't want to do that? You haven't tried, huh? Well, I've heard it explained, just like the kalpavrikshas in the spiritual world, they can provide anything and everything, these desire trees that the devotee wants. But the devotee usually, if it's a mango tree, they usually only take a mango. And the same Krishna, he can, in the spiritual world, he can do anything he wants, but his Naralila, he acts just like a human being. We don't hear in his Vrindavan pastimes when he's having lunch with the cowherd boys, he's, putting food in his ear or anything like that. He's Naralila. He's eating just like that. So I guess this is part of his Archana Lila, his deity Lila. He acts like that. But I can't give you a definite answer. I haven't. It's a very good question. I've never heard anything specifically. But I guess Krishna likes to enjoy in so many different ways, He can enjoy by looking, he can enjoy by eating, just like normal. I think we may become a bit bewildered as well. Maybe a bit proud, as if Krishna jumped off the altar every time we did an offering. And of course, part of Krishna's Leela on this world, just like his disappearance Leela, is he always gives the conditioned living entities an opportunity to stay antagonistic towards him if they want. So for those who have less faith, he doesn't jump off the altar, he doesn't dance on the altar, and in that way, if they want to continue to be envious of Krishna, they have that, they can see him just as matter, as a statue. So he's also facilitating that. But then those who have the vision, they have prema, they can interact with the deity, they can see him walking, they can talk with him. It'd be nice if we can discuss that later. It's a really nice question. Hare Krishna Pr. I don't know specifically, but I was just also talking to Bhakti Ed the other day that when we talk about the Sankhya Yoga and the different ways of categorizing the material elements, there's actually, we may just read Bhagavad Gita and Krishna says Bhumira Purnalova Kam Buddha Evacha, and we think, oh, that's it, that's the only way we can divide the material elements. But actually Krishna explains to Uddhava, I'm pretty sure in the Uddhava Gita, that there's so many different ways you can categorize the material elements. He says, I can't remember the exact numbers, but he says some scholars think there's 16, some think there's 10, some think there's 27. There's unlimited ways of categorizing it. Even in modern science, we can do the same thing. We can categorize based on the number of neutrons and atoms, and previously it was more of a way like we do today, the earth element, water element. So it's the same with Krishna. He's unlimitedly qualified, unlimited qualities, unlimited traits and aspects, and they can also be divided in unlimited ways. So you may say he has 6 opulences, you may say he has 64 qualities, but the truth is he is unlimited, not only in his qualities and the quantity of his qualities, but also in you could unlimitedly categorize them as well, So yeah, I can't give you any, that's the only thoughts I have on that, but maybe someone else has heard something exactly. Any other on this side? Questions, comments? Okay. Thank you very much. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Shri Prabhupada ki jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai, Gaura Premanandi.